Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about the interview assessment. As you are all aware, each and every one of you will be asked questions based on the position you applied for. In my previous video and in my previous online lessons with you, we've talked about the different types of questions, such as tell us about yourself question, direct and indirect questions, as well as problem-solving or situational questions, and the final one was behavioral questions. So do expect a range of questions for each and every one of you. So as you can see in the slide in front of you, the interview assessment will be held in week 7, which is approximately 2 weeks from now. And as you can see as well, the interview assessment will be 25%, and this will be held during our regular class lesson, which is between 11 to 2, or for some of you, 8 to 11 a.m. So let's look at what you're supposed to do for the interview assessment. So among the things that I've mentioned would be what to prepare for the interview session itself. And my focus today would be on what will be assessed. So let's begin with your cover letter and your resume. About a week ago, you have submitted your resume and cover letter on Smart 3. And those two documents will actually make up 20 marks of your interview assessment. So for all interviewees are expected to bring their resume and cover letter. So the same applies for your interview assessment as well. So these two documents will be judged based on a few criteria. We will look at the first one, which is content and organization. So in terms of content and organization, we will look at whether you have presented your content using language that is grammatically correct. We will also look at whether the document you have prepared looks professional, whether it's neatly done, and as well as the vocabulary. We talked about job descriptions previously, whereby there are certain terms that you use frequently. For example, verbs especially. Let's say words like troubleshoot, you handle customer complaints, you had to, for example, serve customers, as well as maybe in some cases you have to design, you also have to record, or you have to present certain things. So these are all the vocabulary that are expected in your resume and in your cover letter, especially in terms of when you talk about your abilities, your qualification, as well as your previous job employment. And finally, we also look at the format. In class, we talked about the two main types of format for your CV. One is the chronological resume, and the other one is functional. So you should be adhering to either one of these, and also following certain things like content-wise, you should have your personal particulars, your education background and your qualification, work experience, your references, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that we will look at in terms of your resume and cover letter. So a bigger part of the assessment for the interview actually falls onto your role as an interviewee. So you will see that in this next slide, where as an interviewee, 60 marks will be awarded to the total 80 marks for the interview assessment. So as an interviewee as well, there are a few aspects or criteria that we will be looking at. The first one is, again, content and organization, because we will be focusing on whether you have given contents that are organized and clear in terms of structuring them when you're presenting them. And it's also important that you demonstrate your ability to answer interview questions. Aside from that, we will also look at the quality of your answers. Typically, we would expect you to elaborate on your answers rather than just saying yes or no, or I agree, or I understand, or statements that are short. So let's say, for example, if you're asked the question, how was your experience as a graphic designer in your previous company? So we would expect you to explain more on that rather than just saying, oh, it was great. So we would expect you to elaborate on why you refer to that experience as being great. So please elaborate in order to get more points for this item, which is under the quality of answers. So next, you are also expected to have a good knowledge of the position you applied for. So from week 1 to week 5, we actually talked about what are your roles within the company, what are your job description, the job specification, and we also talk about your company or your organization as a whole. So because of that, you should have ample knowledge of both the business you're going to be in as well as each of your position. Apart from that, we will also look at your presence as an interviewee. Presence here refers to things like your physical appearance and your neatness. So for your interview, you will be expected to attend the interview in formal attire. As we will be doing a virtual conference interview, that would mean I would at least be able to see from the top of your head up to at least half of your body, like what you can see now. So this is the expected, how should I say, footage that I'll be able to see on the day of the assessment. And therefore, you have to make sure that at least you are in formal attire on top. Most likely, I won't be able to see what you're wearing, your pants or your skirt or your shoes. So we will focus on what we can see on the webcam or what can be captured by the webcam. In addition to that, because I'll be able to see at least the top part of your body, I'll be expecting you to give me eye contact because you'll be talking to me or at least look at your video. So in that way, I will know that you are actually paying attention to me. Rapport with the interviewer here refers to whether you'll be able to express yourself freely in front of me, or were you a bit shy, or you were a bit hesitant when you are interacting with me. And in relation to that, we have the next item, which is confidence. So you should be able to project your confidence because you should know what you're talking about, and you should be able to handle questions related to the position you're applying for. And finally, I will also be judging you on your posture, gesture, as well as your mannerism. So posture would mean how you are sitting, where you place your hands. Gestures would mean, of course, your movement. And it could be also your mannerism. For example, were you being polite or were you addressing me correctly? So these are all the things that will be grouped under the presence criteria. And as part of the marks for you as an interviewee, we will also be judging you based on your language, grammar, and delivery. Of course, as you know, the course is focusing on English for the workplace, and therefore, language, grammar, and delivery would be involved. So under this criteria, we will look at enthusiasm and vocal variation in terms of your delivery. English language is, of course, a tonal language whereby you don't really speak in a monotonous way. And because of that, we will be looking at some of these components. In addition to this, we will also look at your pronunciation. audibility, and clarity. So one concern with this is that we are going to do the assessment online, meaning on a virtual platform. So it's possible that there could be some issues with some of you, especially if you don't have good or stable Wi-Fi on the day of the assessment. So usually when this happens, I will actually ask you to maybe repeat what you've just said, or if it's really, really bad that we have problem understanding or hearing one another, we might have to reschedule. But otherwise, usually I will just ask you to repeat and you could do the same so that we'll be able to hear one another quite clearly. In terms of pronunciation, we're looking at whether I'll be able to distinguish the words you're pronouncing and whether your pronunciation is correct. And then under grammar, we will also be looking at your sentence structure, whether you're using the right tenses, or whether the verb form you have adopted is correct or not, as well as words that you use. So that would fall under vocabulary. So have you been using the words that we've spoke about when we discuss workplace English or language at the workplace? So this will also include things like formality that we have covered, and of course things like how you address the interviewer and how you phrase your word, whether they were phrased in a polite manner. And finally, we will also look at your overall chances of success. This refers to your ability to convince the employer that you are a suitable candidate for the position that you have applied for. So those are the criteria that we'll be looking at. And on the next slide, I will be focusing on some things that you need to do for the interview assessment. I believe that we've covered most of this, but this will be sort of a summary of what you need to do to prepare yourself for the interview. So first and foremost, for the interview session, you will need to be in formal attire. So make sure you go through the textbook. There are quite extensive explanation on what you should wear for the interview assessment. So it covers everything from top to toe. So how you should have neat hair, how your attire should be formal attire, whereby men you should be wearing a men's shirt rather than a t-shirt, and the ladies blouses, jackets, blazers if you want, and you could even wear formal baju kurung if you want to. And of course, because this is formal, we will not accept any t-shirt, even if you wear collared t-shirt, any caps, and look also on the pages on grooming, especially those with longer hair, so how you should groom yourself so that you look neat on that day. So again, refer to your textbook on this. So in addition to that, I've just mentioned just now that you'll be given 20 marks for your cover letter, which is your application letter and your resume. Therefore, these documents must be uploaded on Smart 3 before your assessment. So on Smart 3, you will see that I've given you a deadline. Please adhere to that deadline, yeah? As for your video resume, yes, you have also done this last week and you were asked to actually submit your YouTube link on Smart 3. So all these elements will have to be there before your interview assessment. So this is also the case in actual real life interview, because you have to submit all this before you will be asked to call for an interview. So we're just practicing what you should practice in real life as well. And then for the interview session, a week ahead of your interview, I will be sending out not really emailing, I would say WhatsApping you the schedule of the interview session. So usually for the interview, you will go to the interview session based on your group. So we have, for example, 6 groups in one section. So group 1 will go first, followed by group 2, 3, 4, and 5. So for group 1, each of the member within that group will go one by one, as this is an individual interview. So because of that, ahead of the interview session, you will get the timetable and you will know exactly when is your slot. So please get ready 10 minutes before your session, for the reason that there are quite a few things you might need to prepare beforehand. For example, you'll have to make sure you have stable Wi-Fi. You'll have to make sure that you are in a position whereby uh, your webcam is actually showing half of your body, and maybe you will need some time to make sure that your surrounding is neat for the interview assessment. So try as well to maybe test out your mic and your webcam to make sure that everything is working prior to the assessment event. So most importantly, when you attend the interview session, you should know what are your roles and what are the duties of the position that you're applying for. So if you are applying to be for example, photography director, you should know what your job entails, because it's likely that you will be asked questions related to that position. It could be relating to photography, or it could be relating to how to arrange the set when you're taking photographs, or it could be how to manage models, how to manage the other staff within a shooting or photography shooting session. So I would also like to remind you that prior to the start of the interview, please make sure you greet the interviewer, and the interviewer will usually greet you as well before you actually start the formal interview. So as mentioned in my previous lesson and in my previous video, usually they will start with some warm-up questions. So that will be after greeting you, they will start with warm-up questions before they go into the different types of questions. And finally, of course, at the end of your interview, please make sure you thank your interviewer before you logged off of the virtual interview session. Yeah, so those are some of the things you have to keep in mind when you prepare yourself for the interview, as well as some of the things or the equipments or materials such as your CV, resume that you need to prepare. So on the next slide, you will see some interview pointers, and I will begin with the first one. For you as an interviewee, it's very important for you to preempt questions. And as you are aware, you have been assigned an activity under Unit 2, which was Activity 9, to prepare interview questions relevant to your position. So because of that, you should already have a set of possible interview questions. And the interview questions that you were asked to do was actually based on the different types of interview questions. You were asked to prepare 2 questions for each type of interview questions. In relation to that, since you have those questions with you, you would have the opportunity to actually practice answering these questions before the actual assessment event. So please make use of your time wisely and make sure you go through your interview questions and try to come up with answers for the questions you have prepared. That way you'll be able to practice answering possible questions. Next, we will look at the interview in terms of maintaining the formality and the flow. So although you know that I will be interviewing you and I'm your lecturer, so perhaps you know who I am, unlike in typical interview settings whereby you usually don't know who they are, your interviewers are. But you need to keep in mind that we will be conducting a formal interview for the assessment, and therefore please maintain the formality. You will be expected to use formal expressions. And the flow of the interview here under this point refers to avoiding long pauses. So try not to have long pauses to think of your answer before you answer to my question. So try to make them short and try to give as immediate answers as possible. And in relation to that, in order to avoid longer gaps or quiet slots between one question to another answer, make sure you elaborate on your answers. So that will help you to gain marks in terms of the quality of your answers as well. So finally, make sure you are in a suitable location. So as mentioned just now, because we are having a virtual interview, so make sure you have firstly a quiet and neat room to have the interview in, because we don't really have an office or a venue for you to go to. You will either be in your living room, some of you, I know you are staying in the hostel, so some of you could be there. So make sure you are in a quiet and neat room, especially those who are based in the hostel, because based on my experience, you are in a room with 3 or 4 other people, right? So you might want to find someone else, or maybe ask for their help to be out of the room for a while. The interview session, as you know, is only about 5 minutes, so the slot is quite short. So it should not be a problem for them to maybe allow you to use the room for that few minutes and then come in once you are done. So because of that, no distraction is also important. We don't want suddenly one of maybe your roommates asking you a question or singing, or for those at home, we don't want children or brothers, younger brother or sister running to you during your assessment. And another thing I would like you to make sure is to make sure that you are in a place with good lighting. I'm saying this because based on previous experience, sometimes some of the interview candidates, they are seated at a place whereby they have like windows or doors behind them. So because when you have windows or doors behind you, there will definitely be lights shining from outside or from behind you. When that happens, I will not be able to see you clearly. So it's very important for me to be able to see you clearly, because I'll be looking at your expressions, like I say, your top half, as well as your gestures and your movement. So if the lighting is not good, I will usually ask you to move. So therefore, it's important that perhaps you select a place with good lighting beforehand, before we start the assessment, so that we can save time. So as you know, we'll be following a schedule, so it will be quite tight. So we don't want to be wasting minutes away by just repositioning everything, testing out your webcam and testing out your microphone. So I think those are all for this video. So for your preparation, I would like to wish you all the best, and I will see you during the assessment. Thank you for watching.